Welcome, friends, to the Ancient Arts Podcast. Join us now as we rediscover healing methods from long, long ago. Reconstituted for today's modern world. From India to Japan, from South America to Egypt. Let's take a trip around the globe and find simple answers to today's complex health issues. The commentators are not medical doctors, and no medical claims are being stated. The comments made have not been evaluated by Health Canada or the FDA and are not intended to diagnose, cure, treat, or prevent any disease. So pull up your favorite cushion, pour yourself a cup of your favorite herbal tea, and get ready to go back in time. Time to rediscover the mystery and the magic of the ancient arts. Hi everybody, welcome to the Ancient Arts Podcast. Welcome to 2020, clear vision for the future. So glad that you could take time out of your schedule to join us for today's exciting episode. We've got a great one for you today as we're going to talk about the history of cooking food. And it's a fascinating story. You're going to absolutely love this story. But before we dive into it, I want to remind you of some amazing, exciting live events we have coming up in 2020 in the Toronto, Ontario, Canada area. And there's some great ones for you. First and foremost, it's our Health Coach on Fire course. This kicks off on February 4th here in the Markham Hilton Suites and Convention Center. 4 evening classes, Tuesday nights, starting at 7:30. And this is a gateway course which opens the door for you to become a health coach and wellness advocate. And these are people that go on to guide clients to achieving their goals of health and happiness, and many health coaches go on to one-on-one consulting and doing their own workshops, creating online programs, writing a book. Some even partner with other professionals. Some start their own live cooking shows, which is really relevant to today's podcast. So you can get all the information and details at my website portal at bgangel.com. And always, we have all of our tickets on the eventbrite.com ticketing service, and just key into the search menu, Health Coach on Fire. Our amazing life frequency classes are starting Tuesday nights in March, and this is where we focus in on the understanding of how energy and electricity is at the heart of the healing process, and we spotlight unique modalities and new technologies that can aid you in increasing the human condition, namely vibration and energy flow. And we really dial into many of the ancient arts techniques at the life frequency classes. And after these classes, you're going to attract a lot of like-minded individuals, which will be really more tuned into achieving their goals of health and wellness. Our big event of the year is happening on April 30th, May 1, 2, and 3, and that is the National Conference of Traditional Healing featuring the Legends of Health. What a blockbuster event. 24 international speakers will be taking the stages, 24 workshops, the vendor garden, consulting with the docks, ballroom, and so much more, all for one very low price. This is an amazing event. You'll get to meet some of the legends, especially in the ancient arts world. So much from the legends and the masters in the industry. So many amazing skills and techniques, especially in the ancient arts world. And you get details and tickets at eventbrite.com. Just key into the search menu, Legends of Health. Hey, let's dive into today's episode. Today, I really wanted to focus in on something a little bit different, but no less important in the ancient arts, and it's one of the most popular methods for cooking our food. And done right, using the BarBQ can be an incredible tool which can yield amazing results, and especially if you're on a paleo diet. And this is something that has a fascinating history. You know, Understanding the origins of the barbecue, we really have to start to understand some of the ancient cultures, and one of the most interesting is the history of the Buccaneers. Now, the Buccaneers were a semi-lawful sailor and soldiers who tended to harass the Spanish ships and the ports in the Caribbean islands. And this was happening around the 17th century. And to Spain, they were just ordinary pirates. But for their nations, the Buccaneers were more than just that. The Spanish considered the region of the Caribbean islands from the Isthmus of Panama to the mouth of the Orinoco River as their own treasure house. The region is also known as the Spanish Main. And it was in this point in time, from the 16th century all the way to the 18th century, that the Spaniards transported gold, silver, and many other valuable treasures back and forth to England, France, and many of the European nations. And the Caribbean islands and the Americas were considered really areas of high wealth and a lot of treasures. So when the English occupied Jamaica, they were providing a base for the Buccaneers to launch their attacks to the Spanish settlements. And this, of course, created a lot of conflict. The Buccaneers got their name from the word Buccaneer. And in the beginning, they were just ordinary European settlers and adventurers, mostly French and English, who inhabited on the Hispaniola and other areas nearby the Caribbean islands. To most of them, they were hunters who earned their living by selling smoked meat of natural cattle and wild pigs, boars, to the passing ships. They were often seen cooking the meat on wooden frames and then drying it in the hot Caribbean sun. The Tupi Indians were the originators of this style of cooking using wooden frames, and this was called bucan. This is how the Buccaneers got their name. As those early Buccaneers were under constant threat, they had to change their locations quite often. And in the mid-1620s, they finally found a safe house, a safe island to establish, and that was called Tortuga. And although Spaniards tried to drive them out of the French and British settlements from the islands several times in history, eventually they became so strong and so well organized that they started to attack the Spaniards instead. So that's a very interesting history of the Buccaneers. Now, I'm telling you that because they have a strong connection to how the barbecue came into being. Now, let me tell you the rest of the story. The name barbecue comes from the name Barbacoa. Interestingly enough, Barbacoa is believed to have originated centuries ago in Barbados, an island in the country in the West Antilles of the Caribbean. The word Barbados is derived from the word Los Barbados, meaning the bearded ones, a name created by 16th century Portuguese explorers, which was used to describe the bearded fig trees which were covering many of the Caribbean islands. It is widely believed that the West Indies native Taino people, a subgroup of the South American Arawak Indians, were the first to use the fire-resistant bearded fig branches for cooking. They marinated the foods in tropical herbs and spices to enhance the flavors, and then they covered it with banana leaves, and then it was placed in a deep pit, and then it was covered with hot coals. And then what happened is the meat inside the wrapping of the banana leaves would cook slowly, and those wonderful spices would permeate the meat and tenderize it. The natural juices of the meat would be transformed into steam and then allow the sinew to break down, creating this very, very tender, flavorful meat. This preparation was called BarBQ, spelled B-A-R-A-B-I-C-U, meaning the sacred fire pit. And this eventually became barbecue. And these cooking methods were superb for keeping the food from spoiling. So it was a natural preservation method as well. The barbacoa style of cooking was eventually taken to Mexico. We now see that in the slow roasting of proteins over the open fire pit. But more traditionally, we see it in fire pits covered with the succulent leaves of the native plants, especially the agave or the century plant. Mexico's original barbacoa used the country's many variety of moles, and especially the toppings with salsas. And moles are complex, thick sauces used to accompany these meats. They're made from a variety of chilies, onions, garlic, and spices like cumin and coriander and cinnamon and cloves. These are the native spices of the Caribbean islands. These spices were highly prized by the Buccaneers. So the Buccaneers would raid the islands, and they would take these wonderful spices back to Europe, and the Buccaneers were the ones who discovered the cooking of proteins in the pits and then eventually over the open wooden grills. And these spices were called buca. So the nickname became the Buccaneers. Barbacoa was the original name for the barbecue. So it's interesting that traditional games like the turkey and fish are now being used with sides of beans and salads, and they are now slow cooked in pits for many hours, and it has become a big tradition around the world to use smokers, an offshoot of the original barbacoa, to permeate and tenderize the proteins. This style of cooking is legendary around the world and is used literally in every culture. One of the most interesting things for me was when I visited the Caribbean islands for the very first time. This was about 20 years ago, and I started my trips to the Caribbean in St. Kitts, Nevis, in Nassau, and eventually made my way to Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And in all of the islands that I've visited, it's amazing how the tradition of buca and the barbacoa is still very much alive. And I do my best to try to emulate this style of cooking when I return back home. One of the healthiest ways to use the barbacoa style of cooking is to create a bed of coals, and by burning deep, dark woods, especially things like hickory and cherry woods. The coals should be placed in a circle around the pit and leaving the center completely open. Then you can take your meats that have been marinated with these Caribbean spices and then wrap them in banana leaves. And banana leaves are easy to find at your local grocery store. Then you take them and place them in the center of the pit so that as the juices run out of the banana leaves, that they don't create a fire, which then can burn the protein. And it's the burning of the protein that creates certain carcinogens which we want to avoid. If it's done right and you take your time and you go at a lower temperature for a longer period, I call it low and slow, you will get much better results. And when you open up those banana leaves, the treasure inside will be well worth the wait. It's fascinating to study some of these ancient cultures and to bring forth some of their lifestyles and some of their tools and techniques. And that's what the Ancient Arts Podcast is all about. I hope you enjoyed today's little different episode of Ancient Arts, and I hope that you subscribe, like, and share this episode with a friend, a neighbor, and a loved one. Happy 2020 to all of my Ancient Arts fans. Bright suns all the way. Have yourself a stress-free and healthy day, and don't you dare forget your final departure day can be delayed. Until we meet at one of our live events, blessings. Bye for now.